Well, hello Puebla. My name is Hugh Jones, and I'm a wildlife filmmaker. I work for BBC Earth, and it's a great pleasure for me to be speaking to you here in Mexico. In fact, the times I've spent in Latin America have been really influential in leading me to do the job that I do. As you can see from these pictures, when I was about 4, my anthropologic parents took me to the Amazon jungle. They were studying a tribe of Indians. And so I went to live with these Indians, and as you can see, I went pretty native pretty quickly. Took all my clothes off, I had a blowpipe, I had a pet monkey that lived on my head, and also a pet parrot. Now don't worry, I can promise you this is the only time that I'm going to show you my penis in this presentation. Anyway, so it's my experiences with animals and travel as a young boy that I think inspired me to become a wildlife filmmaker. And I've been working at the BBC for about 15 years now. I've worked on series such as Human Planet and Planet Earth. And my latest series that I've been making is just airing in the BBC and is going to be shown in the world very soon. It's called Life Story, and it's narrated by a god in England, someone called David Attenborough. And the remit of the series is to look at how animals meet the challenges of their various life stages. Now, I was given the honor to be asked to make the first 2 programs. Well, I say it was an honor, but actually it was incredibly intimidating. The problem is the BBC has such a long legacy of making world-beating wildlife content. And each time a new series comes out, it seems to get even more spectacular with even more impressive stories. So you can imagine, as a producer, knowing you're going to have to raise the bar yet again is very, very daunting. But along with my team, we started thinking, well, how can we reimagine a wildlife blockbuster? And the first thing we knew we had to be is original. We had to find new stories. But that's incredibly hard in the natural world these days, partly because there's been so many spectacular things that have already been filmed, but also because animals are really struggling, or the whole of nature is really struggling as human encroachment spreads across the globe. But so we knew we had to do it, so we started speaking to scientists, and we spread our net really wide, but most lines of inquiry come up with nothing. But with a bit of persistence, eventually we started finding some really interesting leads. And the first thing I want to show you was the first new idea we came across is about a tiny little jumping spider. He's probably only about 3 millimeters big, but he's got a big character. And what's so impressive about this guy is the lengths he has to go to persuade the female of the species that he's a worthy mate and not just another potential meal. And this is him in action.
He will need a show-stopping trick to avoid becoming lunch. With his fan unfurled, he begins an ever more complicated series of dance moves to try and seduce her. At last, she succumbs to his advances and allows him to mate with her.
So one new story doesn't make a series. Thank you very much. And we knew we had to find more. And it's interesting that the world of animal courtship proved a very fertile area for us to explore. And I think it's true in human culture and amongst animals that probably the most bizarre behaviors are usually the result of a male desperately trying to persuade a female to have sex with him. And it was the same case with the next really amazing story that we found. And I think this is probably one of the most amazing new behaviors I've seen in a number of years. It's a story about a pufferfish. And this guy, he holds a torch for all us average males out there. he's not particularly good looking, and he certainly doesn't have any impressive displays he can rely on. So instead, he has to work hard to win love, and this is how he does it.
He can't rest for more than a moment, but must work 24 hours a day for a week, or the current will destroy his creation. A final tidy up, and his masterpiece is complete.
So this is quite extraordinary what this fish is doing. Scientists are only just beginning to understand it. Essentially what he's doing is creating a sculpture. It's like an elaborate nest, and the female's going to judge him on his artistic abilities. If she thinks this sandcastle that he's building 20 meters down under the sea is good enough, she might just let him fertilize her eggs, which she'll lay in the middle. And I'm pleased to tell you that this chap, he did win the heart of the female. It's just incredible, no? So we were finding news stories, but there was no way we were going to be able to find enough news stories to fill 6 hours of television. So we knew we were going to have to find new ways to tell old stories. And I started thinking about how wildlife films had been captured in the past, and it struck me that we'd always filmed them from this epic perspective, almost like the view of God. So I started thinking, well, what happens if we change the epic into the intimate? What happens if we got down onto the animal's eye level and we tried to really immerse ourselves in their world and see the world from their point of view? And we started talking about the possibility of filming animals with a Steadicam. And at first it seemed like a crazy idea because the Steadicam is a big, bulky rig, and I just thought we'd miss too many unique moments to make it worthwhile. But if you want to be original and creative, you have to take risks. So we decided to give it a shot, and to give ourselves a fighting chance, we decided to work with one of the best habituated animals in the world. And what I want to show you next is, it's not the final sequence that you see in the film, it's something we put together when we just came back from the field. But it has a certain raw energy to it, and hopefully when you see it, you'll see why we were so excited by what we saw. Oops, sorry. So now meerkats, thank you very much. Meerkats are incredibly well habituated. In fact, so much so, they'll even check if the cameraman's lens is clean before you start filming them. Nonetheless, it was back-breaking work. Trying to carry this kit in the blazing Kalahari Desert was really hard going. But when it all came together, it was so compelling, we thought, well, we need to try and find some other animals which we could apply a similar style. And it was kind of ironic that the next well-habituated animal we came across was the fastest animal in the world. I've been speaking to this cameraman, Kim Woolhutter, and he'd been following 2 cheetah sisters since they were cubs, and he'd come to know them so well that they would just accept him and allow him to walk along them whilst they went about their day. Now, not even the best cameraman could hope to chase after a cheetah with this strapped to him. So instead what we did is we got a Red Epic camera, which is a very small 4K cinema quality camera, and we stripped it down to make it as light as possible and stuck 2 gyros onto it, the hope being that Kim would be able to run after the cheetahs and carry the camera, and the gyros would stabilize it so the shots weren't too shaky. So we headed out to Zimbabwe, and it wasn't looking that positive. It was only when we arrived that Kim admitted to us he'd only seen 1 cheetah hunt in the entire time he'd spent in this reserve. But it doesn't feel like you can often say this wildlife filming, but this time we got more than we could have possibly dreamt of. So guys, this is 2 cheetah sisters making their first big kill of their lives.
But her sister is ready. Whilst the impala is still on his feet, he's dangerous. They struggle to deliver the killing bite. Finally, it's over. At this moment, with this first success, these young cheetahs have entered the adult world.
Thank you. So we were discovering lots of interesting new behaviors, and I think we were determining a really interesting new way to film animals. But it was looking into those cheetahs' eyes when they made their kill that I realized what made our show so fresh and so distinctive was that we were looking at animals like they had emotion and like they were individuals. And that might sound quite anthropomorphic to you all, but actually there's a lot of research going on proving that character, personality, and emotion are very important traits in animals, and traits that help them meet the challenges of life. And so once I realized this, it was quite liberating, and I thought, well, maybe we could try taking on some sequences that could only be captured on a long lens, as long as we applied these emotional sensibilities. So I decided it was time to film something I'd wanted to film since I saw it as a little boy of about 7. It's a story about geese that nest in the Arctic. And it doesn't sound that exciting, and it was quite hard work persuading my executive producer to part with $100,000 to do it. But we set up this incredibly complex expedition to go to Greenland. We were camping for a month in the field, and every day we'd have to climb up these cliffs and try and find these barnacle geese. And then when we found the barnacle geese, we would have to watch them 24 hours a day because the sun never sets in the Arctic summer. And then when we finally saw the geese were hatching, we waited for the moment that we'd been waiting to film. And the story is, basically, these geese nest high up on the cliffs in order to avoid the Arctic fox, which would eat their eggs. But the problem is, these chicks are born hungry, and because geese eat grass, the parents can't feed them. So instead, they have to lead them down. And before you see this, I want to warn you, this is not a goose snuff movie. These chicks are designed to do what they do.
One last chick. The perfect launch. And and a controlled drop. This is as good a descent as it's possible to make. Its parents are there to meet it. A little dazed, perhaps, but all in one piece.
Thank you very
Well,
much. I'm running out of time, but I think you can imagine why this is becoming viral on Facebook at the moment, and certainly it was the talk of the series. I would have liked to show you so much more, but hopefully I've given you an insight in how we try to make world-beating wildlife content. And I just wanted to finish by saying the motto of this event is change the world. And sometimes I feel a bit guilty that I'm not doing enough to kind of help spread the message of conservation. The films I make celebrate the wonder of the natural world. They're not particularly hard-hitting documentaries. But I realize I do have a role to play. It's my dream and the dream of BBC Earth, everyone who works there, that we are storytellers who can captivate a huge audience around the world with the wonder and the spectacle of nature. And it's our belief that if we can make people fall in love with nature, perhaps that is the most powerful tool we have of all to persuading them to nurture and protect it. Thank you very much.
Bravo.